Good afternoon, everybody. I've got the last slot before lunch, and in the Nordics, people generally take their lunch between 11 and 12, so there's some very hungry people already. So I've got probably 15 to 20 minutes, and I'll try and be quite fast on some of the slides. But the last slide I finish on is quite an important one for the location where we are, so please bear with me for the last slide. I'm going to talk about your data center, not from within the data center, but how it connects to the rest of the world. And that means that you're going to have various providers that you'll choose to go with, and they will give you connectivity. I'm not here to speak about Finland. I'm speaking how Finland connects to the world, and what the options are and what the possibilities are. But first I'd like to speak a little bit about, in a wide-ranging presentation, a little bit about diversity and what diversity means. I'm going to show you a little video with two scenarios with two different carriers. Hoping we're going to have the video, please. It's 2 minutes.
From sending Japanese TV viewers the perfect serve from Madrid to providing international IP, voice, and roaming services, today's communications industry demands perfect performance. Designing resilience into telecom solutions is nothing new. Many providers talk of diversity as standard, a standard that usually provides different paths between single points of presence. Diversity is maintained across long distances, over land and sea. But just as with cable cuts, the fact is that building fires, power failures, and disasters are a part of life. And when they happen, they cause disappointment and dismay, but only to those who are unprepared. Now imagine the same scenario with Teliasonera International Carrier, a provider whose solutions are built on its own fiber, using an exacting design principle that includes red and blue diverse paths through town and countryside. A provider that has dual interconnected POPs. A provider that maintains diversity on undersea cable systems globally and carefully manages any third-party partners. The result is so much better for so many of our customers. Teliasonera International Carrier. Thank you for bearing with me. The key point with those quotes at the end, their customers, if our network goes down, their business goes down. So it cannot go down. Now we're going to talk a little bit about connectivity now. I'm not sure where I'm pointing this to make it work.
We have a button. That's the label.
Okay, thanks. So first a little bit about who Teliasonera are. You're here in Finland, you've seen Sonera, the mobile operator. Telia is the former mobile operator, or the former incumbent of Sweden. The two merged in 2002. Today, the group has 20 mobile operators and fixed operations as well. So the dark grey shows the retail footprint of the organisation. Also, you see some of the brands that we're using. So you've heard of Omnitel, you've heard of Sonera and Telia, etc. But at the bottom, you'll find that we have two organisations, Teliasonera Finance. So we can look at various ways of funding and leasing for customers, and then the international carrier business. And that's the part where I sit. So I'm not going to here to talk about Sonera or Telia, but I'm here to talk to you about what we can do for the rest of the world. So here we are. Here we are, rather, at the edge of the map, the edge of the global map. We, Teliasonera International Carrier, we own our own fibre network. That means we've dug ditches, we put down ducts between 2 and 12 ducts, and we blow fibre through those. And each fibre is capable of carrying 80 wavelengths at the optical level. On top of the optics, we then run the packet networks, level 2, level 3, IP and applications. We use 5 different transatlantic cable systems. We own, as part of the consortium, TAP 14. The reason there's so many links is because they each have a north and a south link, so that each of the cables is diverse themselves. We cross the Atlantic from Northern Europe, from Nora-Nobel, just outside Copenhagen, also from Paris, as well as London. Most of the American Tier 1 players, and by the way, Tier 1 in connectivity is good, Tier 1 in data centers is bad. You want to be up there at Tier 3 or 4. So we are not like the Americans who take a lot of their traffic through London. We balance our traffic from Northern Europe through the North route, from Southern Europe through the South. We own our own fibre around the US, and then we lease. So we're a buyer of optical network through different cable systems. We also have at least 3 different cable systems across the gateway pops of Hong Kong and Singapore. And then we ring the globe, because we have a lot of traffic between Europe and Asia direct. We ring the globe westbound from Singapore, back through the Middle East. So you're 185 milliseconds from Paris to Singapore. So we have control of the optical piece and the IP piece on top. We connect 200 POPs. That includes 100 carrier-neutral data facilities. We're in 19 Equinix facilities, all of Interactions facilities, most of Telecity and Telehouse facilities as well. So that's where we do the majority of our business. They're our revenue centres. The reason why there's a difference between the number of POPs is because we're exporting venues. So we're at Premiership football grounds or Wimbledon tennis, etc., places like that, or horse racing locations around the Nordics. I'm going to talk a little bit then about exploding bandwidth. Where's it all coming from? There's a lot's going on. When I started in this industry, the whole needs of the industry were driven by corporates. And we were all talking about MPLS and how we were going to support the needs of multinationals and globalization. Today it's completely different. Our world is driven by consumers, and they're going through these 5 trends. Before you leave a burning building, you have to update your Facebook status. Anywhereization, you expect to do everything everywhere with every device, and you expect them to be synced as well. A flattening world. In the past, information was only available to a few. Now there is not just data, but huge amounts of information available to a much broader audience. And the age of diversity, we have different business models. We expect to do things differently. Over-the-top players, carriers, in the telecoms example, we need to support that through connectivity. Connecting the dots. We think that it's not just a .com thing. It's about the people who actually connect up to networks and use networks efficiently. They will be the people who will be tomorrow's business successes. So it's using the network in a smart way. Those industry trends have consequences back on us in the carrier space. So we've seen a whole raft of new technologies driving traffic. Everything, and it hasn't stopped. We've got high-definition voice coming on board. We've got full 3D voice and holograms coming forward. That technology is in test today. It's going to be the next sort of Skype service going forward. It's not just new technologies. It's new access methods. So as we go from 3G to 4G, which we did in the Nordics in 2009, we saw the traffic, data traffic, double overnight. It changes the way people do business and how they do it. So not just from new sources, but from new devices. You'll have heard about M2M, and one of the conservative forecasts is 50 billion connected devices. And it's not just the power at my home that's no longer read by somebody coming around to read the meter, that's automatically sent by a dedicated SIM card back. It's everything. In the Nordics, we track mooses. And it's actually incredibly popular to do it. But there's lots of different things. Your fridge will have an IP address. Your turkey that you buy to put in, if you're British, at Christmas we eat turkeys, that will have an IP address. The fridge will recognise that the turkey has gone into the fridge. It will know when it needs to be used by. It will also know when it needs to, if you're taking it to the cooker and the oven, they will have IP addresses. They can give you suggestions about how to cook it, what you might like to do. All this is the future. It's going to happen. Even the chocolate bar will have an IP address. The way we think about IP addresses today is not the way of the future. It's going to be very different. So to support that Internet of Things, we need to drive things forward. A final thing, that traffic demand just goes on irrespective of economic slowdown. And this is just a proxy for that. So the Dow Jones Index is the value of shares. And you're investors here, so you know that it's a proxy. And then I'm taking the proxy here of the traffic on our network. There's no relationship between it. The traffic growth is insatiable and constant. So, back to the optical, back to the IP. I'm just going to take a whistle-stop tour of some of the changes going on and what you should be aware of outside of your data center. I said those pieces of fibre, those called 80 wavelengths. Those 80 wavelengths, a short time ago, were limited to 2.5G. So that's what I could squeeze down a piece of fibre, actually a fibre pair, because the light goes in one direction, so you need a fibre pair to bring the traffic back the other way. And by the way, there's 192 fibres in a single duct, so there's a vast amount there. But even so, we were looking at 2.5G. We're now using 10G everywhere on our network, and most of the other operators are doing that. The standard is moving to 100G. We've just replaced all of our optical equipment in Europe with the latest from NSN, and in America with the latest from Infinera. And we now have 100G capability here. But last November, we proved on our live network in California, between San Jose and Los Angeles, a 1,000-kilometer route with 300 gig of traffic. We proved 500G super channels. We're already there. It's not productized, but the technology is already there. And Infinera are working on terabits. So you can look at a terabit times 80 just in a single fibre strand. That's an amazing move forward. This is a nice graph, and it's my way of avoiding showing a graph that goes down like that. Because in my industry, that will be the price per bit transported. And that's good news for you guys. So what we're looking at is coding with this demand and keeping our cost base the same. And this technology moving forward in the optical space is really important for us. And it's baffled a few people. The New Scientist, a magazine I respect a lot, in 2011 had its forecasts, no, 2010 had its forecast for 2011. One of those top 10 forecasts was that the net would slow down. The net has not slowed down. I'd love to say this is our capacity planner, but it's a little bit like me, a bit overweight, spends far too long behind a desk. I'm going to step over this slide quickly. This is just to say we're using 10G today. We have done the technical evaluation to move to 100G. As we swap over, we're doing that just, the timing depends on economics. And we have some design rules that we can read through later. We're going to move on and spend some time on other things. In the optical space, there is a big change going on. I think most people in this room would think there are probably 30 to 40 providers that they could use for connectivity. Cable and wireless, BT Global, Level 3, Global Crossing, Teliasonera International Carrier, I hope you have me on your list. But actually very few of those control the optical piece. There are only 3 pan-European optical networks. Everybody else is leasing from those 3 pan-European or has a smaller part of the piece. Like GTS have very good coverage of Northern Europe, Poland and Eastern Europe, for example. So this is starting to emerge. Outsourcing. So here we have Rostelecom, one of the 2 major international providers in Russia. coming to us, Teliasonera International Carrier, to actually manage their whole requirements from Russia to Western Europe through cable systems that go from Russia through Sweden. So we actually do that for them, and it's a multi-terabit business. It's our job to solve the piece for them. And then you've also heard a little bit about Facebook in Luleå. Their edge of the Arctic Circle data center is their first one outside the US, and it will support the needs of their EMEA customers. So Europe, the Middle East, and Africa will be supported from that data center, and they have in excess of 290 million end users today in Europe alone. So it's a multi-terabit network being designed by us with Facebook. We are building it at the moment. It's in final stages of build, and it will be completely managed by us. And that is not a 12-month deal, it's a long-term deal. I can't say any more about it because of confidentiality, but it's a game-changing deal in the optical space. So I think you'll see more of that going on into the future.
One quick question, when you say build, that's the logical build, or are you actually putting additional fiber in the ground?
We already have the fiber. What we are doing is we are lighting up dedicated strands of fiber for them with equipment that we agree with them. I can't name the details of it. It's confidential to the deal. And then we will manage that for them fully. So moving into the optical space, again, I'll try and give you the market overview here. So I'm using some information from a company called Renesys. They market themselves as the Internet Intelligence Authority. And what they're very clever at doing is, by the way, the IP business is the best business to be in the world if you're a marketeer. Because every network publishes their full customer list in a BGP routing table. So I know who my competitors' customers are. I also know who they give free connectivity to, second free peering, because that's in a separate list. So I get to know everything. The worst thing is, they get to know it from my business as well. So this company, Renesys, collects routing table information from around the world, 80 different points, and compiles it, uses the statistical differences between peering and transit to work out who is a customer of who. And they can definitively work out, therefore, who are the global tier 1s. So we're looking at some screenshots here of who are the global tier 1 networks in the IPv4 space, which is 99.5% of all IP traffic today. And you see that level 3 appears twice. That's because level 3 bought Global Crossing, another major provider, that gave them to be one of the 3 providers with its own fibre around Europe, because Global Crossing had very, very good assets. So you see that they still manage the 2 networks separately, but together they are mega-sized compared to everybody else. So level 3 are dominating this global carrier space. Teliasonera International Carrier. How many Finns and Swedes in the room knew that Teliasonera International Carrier was the 2nd largest global carrier of IP traffic? Please put your hand up. Nobody. That is based on routing table information. It's not marketing. It's actually based on true traffic and customer routes delivered. There are some other names here that you expect to see with some very different business models. There are some changes in this list if you look over time. And if you look at the blogs that Earl, who's one of the key technical guys at Renesys, right, he actually has a really good summary over this over the last 6 years, and there's been a lot of change. So AT&T no longer appears. Verizon has hugely dropped down. We all remember what was AS701 and UUNet when we all started. What we expect to happen is that China Telecom will come up. If you have a 1/6 of the world's population behind you, ultimately you're going to get into the top 10. Let's not forget that IPv6, please, is the answer. I need to take time and say that's important to do. And in the IPv6 space, you see that people haven't put as much effort into there. and it's still an area that's dominated by too few small networks. We really all need to use a walk of IPv6. And yes, my website is native IPv6. I hope yours is too. Cloud. I'm going to really stick through this, other than to say cloud is really moving on. It's about public and private IP. You need suppliers that give you not just a flat fee pipe, but cloud is about being flexible and pay as you grow. You need, with Ethernet 2 and carrier Ethernet, providers who can give you that connectivity. And Ethernet is important for the private security rather than just public IP. I'm skipping over this to get on to the ends. So I have 2 slides left. This is my summary, my 5-point summary. I'm trying to say, what about the connectivity to data centers then? First, know the reality of what's going on out in the carrier space. There is a huge amount of change. We are needing to deal with scale. We're scaling up to the terabyte level, and you need increased flexibility. At the security level, you might look at your logical and physical security in the data center, the applications, the firewalls, but you also need to think about that other connectivity there too. Enough is not enough. It's not just about having fiber, but it's about how you design the networks such that when something happens, I'm trying not to say when shit happens, but when shit happens, things do get broken, things do happen, it's how you deal with it. We have designed our network in 2 halves, so if you get cut in one half, you get relatively the same performance in the other. There are other providers out there who don't, who will have a backup route, but it goes via Timbuktu, metaphorically. Own your own. At the end of the day, we talk about cloud and the internet, and we think it's this amorphous thing, but it comes down to real assets and real traffic going through real fibers. And choose your allies carefully. So when you do